Davina.
Hi.
Our app is called Politips. So I want to start off, how many of you don't really follow politics too closely? Cool. How many of you are too busy at DBC coding to follow politics too closely? Cool, me too. So yeah, like you, I've never really been very active in the political world. But I've been curious, and I've kind of wanted to be more active in the political world. But the problem was that every time I found myself trying to dig deeper and trying to learn, we came across apps and websites that just were too dense and too intimidating and kind of steered me away from learning more. So our idea was to make this app called Politips. It is basically politics made simple. It's made for novice users, people that are not familiar with politics, or people that just kind of want quick, easy, simple overviews. So this is our landing page. We have 3 links: check out candidates, check out polls, and check out positivity. So we're going to start with candidates. Cool. So we are taken to this page. As you can see here, we have all of the current 2016 presidential candidates listed by party and also listed by rank in current standings. So our top one for the Republicans is Donald Trump. He's listed first. And then you can see here, these bubbles are all pertaining to topics that he's talked about publicly. The way that they are sized actually pertains to what they talk about the most or what they talk about the least. So immigration, he talks about that one the most, therefore it's the biggest. And unemployment, LGBT rights, terrorism, talks about those the least, so they're the smallest. So upon initial glance, especially if you weren't very familiar with code, you could kind of look at this and say, oh, they made that on Paint, or oh, they just threw that together. But actually, this is all written in strictly code. It's a JavaScript framework called D3. And we stored our data in a JSON object and passed it to a D3 layout called the pack layout. And that transformed our data into this pretty visualization you see here. So if we go to another candidate, we have a nice, easy transition to keep our users' eyes excited. And again, you can see here, Rand Paul talks the most about economy, talks the least about LGBT rights, race relations.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about how we got this data, because obviously doing keyword searches or trying to figure out what a candidate talks about the most is not necessarily an easy thing. So when we started this project a week ago, we really weren't sure about what exactly we were looking for. We know we wanted to make politics more accessible, kind of more easier for novices to kind of approach. And we started out thinking, well, maybe we'll try to find out a way to like search through news sites and kind of distill the issues or something like that. Or maybe we'll find out a way to, use keywords somehow, but we weren't exactly sure. And so what we ended up coming up with was a kind of keyword search where we have a few categories that you can see here, and then we kind of parse those categories using what's called a natural language processor. And in order to do that, we actually had to resort to another language. We actually ended up using Python and this toolkit that Python has called the Natural Language Processing Toolkit. And what that allows us to do is kind of do a keyword search in a more sophisticated way. So if we have a topic like immigration, what we did is we have a lot of keywords within that topic. Immigrant. There's lots of different things you could come up with that would be part of a discussion about immigration. And we wanted to search for keywords around immigration in a sophisticated way, which meant that we had to basically normalize our document, which meant doing things like word stemming, where you take many variations of a longer word and cut it down, and lemmatization, where you have a form of a word like running, and you cut it down to its base form, run. And we decided that Python would really, and the natural language toolkit would really be kind of the best way for us to do this, because it just had so many more tools, and it was customizable, and it was open source, and it was really a fun thing to explore too. So that was kind of what we did there. But we also had a lot of data to deal with. We had a lot of text, and pulling that together was no easy thing either.
Hi. So my primary job at the beginning was working with the data that we were pulling. Primarily, I was pulling from Twitter. I was pulling as many tweets as possible from each candidate's timeline, just about up to 3,000 depending on the candidate. So I wrote a thing that it'll go through the tweets, pull down each of the tweets for each of the candidates, write those tweets to a file for each candidate to store what they've been saying, and then also pull out from the debate transcripts, pull out each individual candidate's what they said during the debate, and then it'll go through finally and it'll compile those files for each candidate into a master file. So each candidate had a master file of all the text that we were drawing from, and I think total we had about 54,000 lines of text between all the candidates. So we had a pretty good base to draw from. And then the next thing, well then that would all go through his Python parser, which would pull out the keywords. So the other thing that we can do on this page is if you click on one of the categories, it'll actually search through recent tweets by that candidate for those keywords that we have for that subject. So if you click on education with Hillary Clinton, you get a lot of tweets about education, college affordability. Another interesting one is climate change. Her timeline is interesting, actually. She has a lot of tweets about policy, and some candidates don't. So even climate change, which she talks about relatively infrequently compared to other topics, she still has a lot of substantive tweets about the Keystone Pipeline, things like that. And if you go to one more, she's actually one of the few that actually has much of this category, unfortunately. But you can interact with it. So you can follow her, which we've already done. But you can favorite a tweet, you can retweet it. So you can become more engaged with the process and the conversation.
Another feature we decided to implement is the candidate standings page. We use the Huffington Post API to query the current polling data for each candidate, their percentage of the each party's polls. So here we see that Clinton and Sanders are in the lead for the Democrats, and the Republicans have Trump and Carson. We felt that it would be easy for the user to see a clear and succinct sort of map of who they should be looking at, who are the most important people in the race right now, and where they stand on those issues.
Yeah, so the last kind of, I think one of the more intriguing stats we came up with was this, what we call the candidate positivity. What you're seeing here is the last 25 tweets for each of these candidates ranked by the percentage that we consider positive. Now that's kind of strange because you have to ask, one, what do you mean by positive? And two, how could you possibly get this data? And in order to do that, we actually had to take advantage of some of the other pieces of the language toolkit we were using in Python to implement a simple version of machine learning. And Blanche is going to tell you a little bit more about that.
So with machine learning, you can't actually, without a lot of user input, you can't actually teach a computer much of anything. So we had to go through hundreds of tweets for each candidate, well, each candidate that we decided to poll, the top ones, and rated them by hand based on how we felt they were, if they were positive or negative. Now, it's really hard to teach a computer how to understand language. Somebody would be tweeting something using very positive language, but it's actually a really negative tweet. Like, how do you teach a computer sarcasm? So it was really interesting going through all these tweets and seeing what commonalities there were, and when we fed them through the machine learning.
Yeah. So we could talk a little bit more about the methods we used and kind of the probability models, but I just want to talk briefly about the results. I think one of the most interesting things about this whole process is that obviously if you're training the computer, it reflects your own biases and your own kind of inputs. It's no better than what you've given it, and usually a lot worse than what you've given it. And one of the most interesting things I think that we found is that the actual, the words we found which had the strongest associations, which were most likely to make a tweet either positive or negative, I think kind of lined up with most people's intuitions about what would make for a positive or negative tweet. So, you know, for Clinton, she's talking about women's equality, violence, the GOP. Bernie Sanders likes to talk about himself. You see senator right there. So it was kind of really illuminating, and it was a lot of fun.
For the majority of this project, I worked in the front-end design. And in order to engage our users and to avoid intimidation, as a group we decided to go with a clean and simple design. Subtle animation and playful colors really help achieve this look, and also to complement the D3 animation, which is really the main focus of our project. And the framework we used a CSS framework called Bootstrap, which really helped us achieve this look.
So just to wrap things up, one thing that we thought about after kind of finishing the main features is, where do you go from here? What do you do with this newfound knowledge? What can the user do after using our app? So we included this register to vote link in hopes to encourage people to apply it to the real world after using our app.